Welcome, everyone, to the Herbert C. Kelman Seminar on International Conflict. And I'm here today along with my program on negotiation colleagues. This seminar is co-sponsored by the Program on Negotiation and the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. And as I said, I'm here with my colleagues, Nicole Bryant, James Kerwin, Diane Long, and Billy Fairfield. And it takes a team to really pull these seminars off, and I'm grateful to everyone who's helped us. So we have a very special guest today. I mean, we are delighted that Associate Professor Sarah Federman, she's an Associate Professor of Conflict Resolution at the University of San Diego and at the Kroc Institute. And I guarantee you, you will enjoy her presentation. I just want to tell you a couple of things before we get started. We're going to be recording. And so if you want to see this again, or you want to tell some friends about it, in a day or two, just go on to the Program on Negotiation website and click on events, and you'll see Sarah Federman's talk there. And you can share it widely. And I want to also just point out that Sarah's going to be giving her talk for about 35 to 40 minutes, after which we will have a Q&A, as always. But I just want to remind you, don't put your questions in the chat, put them in the Q&A function, because then we can see them all there together. And what else was I going to say? I think that's about it. As I said, we're going to be recording. Sarah's going to talk for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll, as I said, open it up to you, the audience. And then Nicole will take over for a few minutes at the end, and she's going to be talking about, Nicole Bryant, the Managing Director of PON. She's going to be talking about upcoming events at PON. So let me just start by introducing Dr. Sarah Federman. She's an associate professor, as I said, of conflict resolution at the University of San Diego's Kroc School of Peace Studies. She comes to this work after a decade as an international advertising executive, working in over 10 countries with companies such as Google, Discovery, and the NFL. Today, she unites business savvy with peace-building wisdom. Sarah is the author of several books, including the award-winning Last Train to Auschwitz, The French National Railways, and The Journey to Accountability. She also is the co-author of Narratives of Mass Atrocity, Victims and Perpetrators in the Aftermath, and that book was published by Cambridge. She's written for the Harvard Business Review, Journal of Business Ethics, MIT Sloan Management Review, among many others. Her forthcoming book, Transformative Negotiation Strategies for Everyday Change and Equitable Futures, offers a next generation negotiation book to shake up the field and center negotiation skills in the pursuit of social justice. So Sarah, without further ado, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Hello, everybody. I'm just delighted to be here. You know, I've been attending these for so long, and it's just really wonderful to now be contributing back to this community. And I do, even though it's virtual, do feel that it's community. I use a lot in what I've learned here in my own work. So let me jump in and tell you a bit. So this is a forthcoming book, Transformative Negotiations, Strategies for Everyday Change and Equitable Futures. It's coming out in August. And the point of this book is to really expand negotiation approaches to meet the challenges of our time. Negotiation has served us in many ways, and we all are grappling with a lot right now. So I want to talk about two parts of this. One is negotiating for everyday change, how we can use negotiation to help improve our collective lives, and then for equitable futures. And as Donna had mentioned in my introduction, I had this other life as an advertising executive of going all around the planet, negotiating deals and alliances and so on. And I studied negotiation at the Key Executive Program, which was fantastic. And then they moved me from Manhattan to Paris. where I had a few pivotal moments, but one of which was seeing my own name on a Holocaust memorial wall. And that got me interested in mass atrocity and messaging and the role of corporations and all of this. And that's when I decided that I wanted to unite peace building, business savvy with peace building wisdom, that I wanted to use my time and talents, even if I failed, to try to do something different for the world. So this is what I'm doing to prevent mass atrocity and support resilient communities. To make that shift, I had to seek out a lot of peace builders. So in addition to getting a doctorate in conflict resolution, I sought out people like Kelman. So I'm especially honored to be at this talk today. He also started in a way where I did with my academic career, which was in Baltimore. Kelman actually participated in the lunch counter protest, which is really extraordinary, and told me that he got a lot of his start there and then moved on to more international conflicts. So my work started in the University of Baltimore. I came there, right, with all this business experience, and they wanted me to teach negotiation theory and practice. And I thought I was really ready to teach negotiation theory and practice. I'd done it in 12 countries and 3 languages with all kinds of companies. And I anticipated that the students would have me, ask about their business negotiations or their salaries and so on. And maybe we talk about political negotiations, right? Some of those things I'd learned about in grad school. But I was really surprised and not prepared for different challenges that they were having in Baltimore. And the rules were different. So it's not only that their challenges were different, but the rules and where they were navigating was different. I mean, by the time I was leaving my business career, transitioning, negotiating with Google wasn't that different than negotiating with a data company in Beijing, China. It was sort of something similar, but nothing was more different than Baltimore for me. So here's Wanda. So she's a student who really pushed me hard my first semester. So I came in thinking I was ready. And then I get questions like this from Wanda and other students in the class. How do I get my kids back from the court? How do I get the IRS to drop late fees on my taxes? Can I use this to get a raise in the military? How do I get my brother to stop using drugs before a family dinner? Or my mom to accept elder care or to stop driving. She has dementia. She's driving into dangerous parts of the city where she grew up. School loans was a big question. And even this kind of question, the nurses were pushing opioids after they had accidents, but they were recovering addicts in my class, some recovering addicts in some of my classes. And the books were not that helpful. My own experience, I didn't have these problems. I didn't know how to advise them. I didn't learn about it in grad school, sure didn't learn about it in business. And a lot of the materials that we were using, the syllabus that I adopted, was, maybe couples arguing over whether they should have a new car or go on a vacation. Then we had role plays that came with the textbooks. How to get prunes from Pakistan for some biomedical experiment. And had another one that was how to get a panda from a Chinese zoo. Now, the students were great sports. They did, they read the books, they tried to apply it to their lives. They did the role plays in good spirit, but it's just such a mismatch between what they were up against and what their challenges were and what the materials were that we had. I also began to wonder the ethics about even teaching this to students, these traditional books, these great books, actually, which I had learned a lot about from, and which they were learning from too. But I would get comments like, I don't know, a white woman can say that, but not a Black woman. And I thought, oh my gosh, is that true? Is that true that there are certain things that some students can say and some approaches to negotiation that work if you're white and not if you're Black? And of course, they were right. I started to do the research and of what's been done. And yeah, like your gender, your class, your age, your ethnicity, size, all kinds of things, your name can affect how your negotiation outcomes, how your requests land. So I began to get very concerned about the ethics of teaching it this way or not having caveats, at least as I'm teaching it, until I knew more. I also got concerned about how negotiation became so disconnected from their lives. So often we say, oh, our trainings are useful for all participants, for all readers, for all people can benefit. And to some degree, that's true, but it was really disconnected. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the genealogy of how they got so disconnected, and then how we're going to bring them back and how we're going to move forward. So the field of conflict resolution actually began, it had three eras, three overlapping eras. But the first era was during the Cold War, right? So it's the aftermath of World War II, and it was trying to prevent another world war, and especially nuclear war with the USSR. So there was a real belief in peace agreements, diplomacy, negotiation. This is the game theory, the mutual deterrence, the tit for tat, that we still use today. But that was the dominant part of the field. And that was the dominant part of it until we actually had the end of the Cold War. And we thought there was going to be a peace dividend. But instead, in the 80s and 90s, we had genocide, Rwanda, Bosnia, right? And we had civil wars in Africa. And then the field of conflict resolution shifted kind of away from negotiation and more towards questions of identity and difference and coexistence and culture and history and trauma, right? To start to understand that we need to deal with, you're not just going to negotiate your way out of an ethnic hatred, right? That wasn't going to work. So you can start to see the field sort of shifting. And that became the dominant part of peace building until 9/11, when you couldn't have dialogues with, terrorist groups and so on. And then it became peace through inclusion. So we're hearing that discourse a lot now, right? That violence comes from exclusion. So it's another way of things that can be said. So now we're in this era that was post 9/11 till today that really focuses on narrative and voice and power. And even though these are overlapping discourses, right? So we're having all these things are still going on right now. What we saw with negotiation is that it kind of went off into business, law, and government and got kind of continued on there. And peace building and social change kind of went in a different direction. And we kind of lost touch with each other. So yeah, conflict programs and peace building programs will teach negotiation, but it doesn't include all of the richness that usually we got from identity and culture and gender and history and trauma. We haven't brought those together. So the project that I'm up to now is reuniting this negotiation savvy, right? I love negotiation because it gives you actual tools you can use in the world. But then how do we take that peace building wisdom to think more collectively, to think more systemically about how we can use negotiation in the world? So, okay, let's start with negotiating for everyday change, because this is that pragmatic part of the field that we can bring back. And this is really about taking people from precarity to stability. And, sometimes you hear language about, the closing middle class, the elusive middle class, but it's really about precarity, being unstable financially, emotionally, right, socially, to stability. All right, so to do that, to be able to understand how to use this field, especially in Baltimore to serve my students, I had to understand the context. And this is one thing, of course, that we talk about on peace building a lot, is you have to know where you are and what people are navigating. So I got to Baltimore and did a police ride along. And I went to church with my students. Like, what was this world that they were navigating? And then I really had to draw on their wisdom, because that first semester, first year, I didn't know how to advise them on these questions. So I asked them to coach each other, and they did. And that's when it got really interesting. And so this is what's behind what I'm telling you today, their voices. And then what we couldn't fill in, I got local experts. So violence interrupters, local lawyers, makeup artists, people in foster care who went on to be in the Marines. And then it became a collective effort, a real participatory action research project, those who know that term. And like this work that we all do in peace building in this community that we're in here on this Zoom, it's a collective effort. We're not doing this alone. So we're working together to expand negotiation, right? To serve more people, both today and in the future. So, and I won't go through the whole book today, but I just wanted to tell you some of the chapters so you get a sense of what's coming. We want to talk about imagine. I'll talk about this today. You have to know what you want. We know that for negotiation. You have to be able to ask for it. You have to be able to give as well as ask. And you need to understand money. And this is going to be a big difference in this book than in other books. Digital, #facepalm, how we're using these new devices, technology. Power, not just in terms of power, in terms of money or time, but real structural power, disenfranchisement. Gender, sex, and race. So a lot of the research we have on how gender and your ethnicity does affect your negotiations. I even talk about condom negotiations, which is an interesting area of research. And maybe my favorite chapter, guns, addiction, and an orchestra, that took on really some of the gnarly problems in Baltimore, because I know we have a real international crowd here, which is wonderful. Baltimore, for those of you who don't know, it leads in homicides in the United States, whether it's first, second, or third. It depends on the year, but it really struggles in these areas. So I really wanted to see what negotiation can bring to bear on that. I'm just going to go through a couple of the overviews and just to give you a sense of how we're going to shift negotiation. So imagine, right? You have to know what you want before you can negotiate. And this actually is a lot harder than we think. You know, why do you want what you want? And this, you know, often is informed by things that we're, you know, may know and may not know. Our family, and as Carl Jung said, the unlived lives of our parents. He believed that that was the greatest force in our lives. Our social circle, of course, what other people are doing and wearing and buying and where they're going on vacation and so on in their careers. Advertising, and I know a lot about this from my career, you know, how much and what goes into putting those desires in our brains. But there were different areas I was discovering. You know, historical marginalization affects what people want. Poverty, growing up poor. Shame, and of course, Donna Hicks's, I can't stop beating the drum of this because she was so dead on when she hit dignity. You know, what we want to reclaim dignity that was taken personally or communally. Discrimination affects what people want. Desire for revenge, even. We see this a lot, right, in mass atrocity. So I take students through an activity. So all the chapters have activities as well. So a student says to me, I want a new car. Well, why? I say, well, because I'm wasting time waiting at the bus stop. Well, why does that matter? Well, I have a lot of schoolwork and I focus better at home. Okay. Well, why do you want to focus on your schoolwork? Well, I want to go to a good law school. Okay. Well, why do you want to go to a good law school? Well, I want to help people who've been discriminated against. Okay. Well, why does that matter to you? And then she said, because no one was there for my mother when she needed help. This activity of asking 5 whys when you want something, see if you can get yourself to the 5. Then when she goes and negotiates for this new car, she's doing it because she wants to help people like her mother. And she's going to be less seduced into a car and upgrades that she doesn't need, right? She's grounded in why she wants that car. Now, so that helps kind of unpack some of these influences that can lead us astray. Then we have a lot of play. So I have them come to my house, and I'm saying this, so I hope you'll steal some of these ideas. This is a come as you will be party. So everyone would come over at the end of the semester and act as if it was 5 years in the future, to imagine beyond what they could have imagined for themselves. You know, someone came up as quote pregnant, or they were lawyers, or you know, they had retired, or they had all kinds of different, or they had a drug rehabilitation center they were starting. And one of the students even came to me 2 years later and said she got a job that she had imagined for the party, and she never would have applied for it had she not played this game. So this idea of imagining beyond, you know, in Baltimore, we have a lot of young people who don't think they're going to live beyond 30, you know, and if they don't think they're going to live beyond 30, they make a lot of decisions that kind of makes sure that they don't live beyond 30 or increases the risk that they will, right? So really thinking into the future. So in narrative approaches to conflict resolution, you know, you do a lot of futuring, you think ahead. All right, so that was really important with them to think beyond, and I'm excited to see how it has played out over the years. So that's imagining, but then we have to go from vision to action, right? We can't just dream. You know, there are a lot of kids in Baltimore, right, who want to either be a professional athlete, right, like that's their dream, but they have to have other dreams, and they have to be able to make requests to make those come true as well. And one of the masters of this was Chris Wilson. Maybe some of you have heard of his book, Master Plan, but he had a life sentence. He's from Baltimore, and he actually learned that by creating a vision for his life and communicating that vision persistently to a judge, he was able to have the judge excuse him. And he has been released. He came back to the University of Baltimore, continued his studies, and has gone on to help hundreds of people. Now he's building a whole program for inmates at Rikers Island, right? He really knows how to ask big. So I interviewed him for the book. And one of the things that I discovered about asking that is different if you're coming from historically marginalized groups or from under-resourced communities is the effect of trauma on whether or not people can ask for what they want. It's very hard if you've been beaten your whole life to speak up, right? You've learned that speaking up can cause you pain. Neglect, you learn that speaking up, doesn't matter because maybe your parents didn't have time to listen to you. So neglect was really a reason. Parental messaging, there's some interesting research on this. Messaging in working class families versus middle class families in the United States, of course, but the working class family kids are told to listen and behave and be quiet to show respect. Middle class kids, in contrast, are taught to speak up and ask for what they want and negotiate for different assignments that they're interested in. And those differences affect how comfortable people feel in asking as they move ahead. So it's important to know this when you're teaching negotiation, what's stopping people from speaking up. And context really matters. And this goes back to the ethics. If you're asking for something in the military, that's going to be really different than asking for something in a tech startup, right? Students were laughing at some of the things that books were saying about asking for a salary. They're like, I can't say that in the police. You can't say that in the military. That's not going to work. It's going to backfire, right? And when I teach students from countries around the world, we also talk that there's risk in a number of places of speaking up. You can't just speak up the way you do in the United States if you're a woman in Afghanistan, right? Or have a student who's from China or so on. Like there's different contexts. So we want to, when we're talking about asking, be very clear about when it's, know your context, know when you can ask and know what's stopping you. So because I like play and it all gets very doom and gloomy if you just focus on where we're trapped, I have students play this game called Crazy Requests. So those of you who know Karl Popper and ideas of testing if something is falsifiable, I have the students go out in the world where it's a low stakes situation where they can ask for something that there's no stakes. If the person says no, it's no big deal. And I have them test, is it really true that you can't have things in your life? And it's unbelievable. They can't believe how much power they have. Some of them didn't ask for a raise, even though I told them not to, and got raises. I just said, this is just for play. But they would get free upgrades. They asked people on dates. They had family members help them in different ways. And they were like, one student, she started kind of shaking in class and tearing up when people were sharing this. And she said, I asked her why she was crying. And she said, I just didn't know I could ask. I didn't know that I could have anything. All these years, I've just been taking things on and taking things on. So especially, if you're from an under-resourced community or historically marginalized group or supporting someone from that who's had trauma or neglect, be encouraging about helping them ask. It's not so easy. So that's a lot of fun. And so hopefully you'll try this with your classes or with yourself. But if you just ask and don't give, then of course people get tired of you. So you do need to give back. Where I challenge this a little bit with negotiation, we talk a lot about giving being so important. And in corporate context, those givers, they tend to make more money and they're seen as leaders. I wanted to caveat that because when I was working in Baltimore, you actually find that it depends. It's giving really pays off if that's why you're doing it. Studies show that people who primarily give to others without caring for themselves actually make less money and are twice as likely to be victims of crime and 22% less powerful than those who primarily take. And this really, I saw this in Baltimore where people were doing a lot of caregiving. We have a lot of caregiving in this world. It's unpaid labor, and telling people who are giving just to give more, those who are doing caregiving, really leads them to burnout, and it's not sustainable. And it's often seen as women's work, so women often take the brunt of this. So I assigned something called an unusual give, where you have to give to somebody that you're not used to giving to in a way you're not used to giving. And to their credit, a lot of students gave to themselves. They booked themselves a room in a hotel and they thought about what they really wanted and started to make some positive changes in their lives. Others put orphans through high school in Nigeria. They did amazing things for other people as well. But I just wanted to add that caveat to negotiation that when you're from an under-resourced community, being told to give more might not be the best message. Then money. I wanted to add this to the conversation about negotiation. Very rarely in a negotiation training or materials will you be told how to know how much you can afford. How much can you pay for that car? How much do you need to make to actually take that job? And Cream, that's for those of you who know the Wu-Tang Clan song, Cash Rules Everything Around Me. Really, you want to understand how money and lack of knowledge about money before you even teach people negotiation. I mean, I had a student, we were talking about negotiating for a car, but I realized he was a construction worker with no health insurance. We need to back up and take care of him. But finance, and when you're from an under-resourced community, there's a real lack of trust around financial advice. There's bad advice. People gamble to close the gap. Poverty and hunger affect how people deal with money. There's unforgivable loans, school loans. Some single parents have shame, pressure to tithe in the church. Credit's destroyed. I talk about this. You can't get credit for prison record, and restoring dignity. So in the class, we talk a lot about how you actually take care of yourselves financially. And the second part of this was equitable futures. So I want to talk about not just how you make yourself strong individually. Hannah Arendt, political philosopher, talked about if we just strengthen our private lives, then we only become independent. We don't actually become powerful in the world. We have to actually develop a public self to become powerful. So there's a lot of social justice needs in Baltimore. And one way to use negotiation is to take the advice of Frederick Douglass, who was enslaved in Baltimore in the 1800s, who says, agitate, agitate, agitate. So in negotiation parlance, that means, persistence, right? Keep speaking up. And this part of the presentation, I'm going to really be talking about drawing on wisdom from Baltimore, because there was so much there. So if you have power, because many of you on this call, if you're here, you have internet access, you have time to be here, you have power. So what I want to encourage you to use negotiation in this way is in several ways. One, that we're now at a point where a lot of organizations are building more diverse teams. This is wonderful. You have diversity, you have people from different ethnic backgrounds, genders, phases of life, ages. But now we need to talk about how you build strong teams with these diverse groups. And what I learned in Baltimore and in doing this research is that there's a lot managers can do to do this. And I think we're hopefully now moving into this conversation. One of the just small takeaways from this presentation is to not misinterpret distance as a rejection. So if you're managing a diverse team, that when you have somebody who's not participating in all of your work events and you're like, wait, I'm trying to include them, why aren't they showing up? But they've learned that actual showing up to those events and talking about their lives can increase the distance, right? So to give them that space. But the really exciting thing, and this was from Rosalind, to know about actually bringing people from more diverse backgrounds. So Rosalind said, all right, those from challenging environments have the potential to be world leaders because we're flexible, civil, and yet have the ability to get dogged down and dirty with the best of them. Rosalind was a mother at 16. She did get her bachelor's degree in accounting, and she unfortunately used that degree first to help a drug lord manage his money. She ended up in prison. She served her time, she came out and now helps people recovering, either coming out of prison or substance abuse. But she has a tremendous ability to handle tantrums and people who are much tougher than I can handle. And she says, if they ain't spitting fire, like, I'm not afraid of them. And some of you might be familiar with the term teacup, if people are like very fragile and they're emotionally triggered a lot. One of the things I discovered with people who come from tough backgrounds, they're not going to crack in the C-suite. I mean, they have been through so much and they can handle a lot more. So I think there's something to know when you're mentoring people who are coming from diverse backgrounds. Also understanding that people who are coming from traumatized communities or from under-resourced communities, they can be complicated and need certain kinds of support. So this is Safe Streets there in Baltimore. They take formerly street-involved people and they become the violence interrupters. They negotiate on the street to get people to not kill each other, which is extremely dangerous. They get killed far too often, but they are incredible heroes. The trick is that, as the director says, it's like taking an alcoholic and having them work in the bar. They have to do a lot of mentoring to support these people not to get involved in drug dealing again and not to get street involved themselves. So there's a lot of mentorship there. And just to show you kind of one of them, to show you how they communicate differently, when I sent out a message to students and those I interviewed for this book, to please come to the talk or let them know that I was doing it, I get this message back that says, call me doc, right? Which is terrific. And it's a different way of communicating than kind of maybe like the professional email some are used to, but to not take that as some sign that the person isn't professional or doesn't have major skills useful to you and your organization. I'm going to draw on a bit more Baltimore wisdom in our last few minutes. Some of you may recognize Nancy Fraser, who was born in Baltimore. Her book is really helpful. A couple of her books are really helpful as we negotiate for equitable futures. One is Feminism for the 99%, which talks about when you get into power, when you have power, can you stop closing the door on the people behind you? I mean, students really, when they talk about women not supporting other women, they just so many heads would nod. It was men that often helped them. But really, as we move forward, break the glass ceiling and lean in, she says, when we do that, can we please actually help others and mentor? So really negotiating for equitable futures. And in her 2019 books talks about this is not a black versus white thing. I mean, it's really under-resourced communities. So poor white communities, forgotten white communities, as well as brown and others, right, can work together on this. And maybe, and thank you for those of you who are hanging on till the end, because this might be one of the most important parts of the book and the shifts that I want to make. The win-win part of negotiation from the 80s, the really important move that William Murray and Roger Fisher took us on from win-lose, and to say that we can both win in a negotiation, helps prevent, the nuclear disaster. Now we need to move to win-win-win. Now, William Murray nods to this in Getting to Yes with Yourself, his more recent book. And John Elkington talks about this a bit in his environmental work. But I'm going to build on it for negotiation, drawing on yet another Baltimore native, which you probably didn't know that John Rawls was born in Baltimore as well. And I'm going to take his veil of ignorance that he talks about in the theory of justice, that we need to think about when we negotiate, if we could be anyone affected by a negotiation. So yes, win-win would mean that I win and you win, right? Or maybe just I win and everybody on this call wins. But it doesn't think about other people affected by our decisions, or disenfranchised people who can't get to the negotiation table, or even animals, those without voices, or forests. We want to move to win-win-win. So I want to give you an example of what this looks like. And I'm going to take Poppleton, Baltimore, which was an African-American community since the 1870s. And there was a development project created by La Cité Development and the city of Baltimore to plan 1,800 new residences and commercial space and a charter school. But it didn't take into account the people who already lived there for 3 generations. And people were incensed, and they spoke up and they fought for their homes. But despite the protests, right, the project moved forward. The mayor, Brandon Scott, comes in at the middle of this, years in, and he says, I want to find an equitable solution. I want to help people get their homes back. So he comes into this negotiation later, right? It had started before he began, and he helped people get their homes back. So it was a decade-long fight. This was a win-win initially for the government, city of Baltimore, and for the development company. They got a win-win, but they forgot the communities, eminent domain, how it would affect other people. That kind of win-win that doesn't include other people, one, it's going to lead you to problems down the line, right? People are going to get upset that you didn't have to get so upset. You could have found a way, but you have to think beyond win-win-win. When this agreement was done, if you had taken the veil of ignorance or the challenge that John Rawls put before us and said, okay, if I'm anybody affected by this deal between La Cité Development and the city of Baltimore, will I be happy with it? If I were one of these families, am I going to be happy with this deal? Is it a win-win-win? And if the answer is no, we have more work to do, right? So I really want to encourage us to shift, get the win-win. That's already hugely difficult to switch from the win-lose mindset. But for us to face the challenges that we're facing today with, one, our interconnectedness, we're seeing it more and more. And, talking more about the environment, our collective care for the planet, right? And the voiceless. And okay, you're going to say, all right, well, listen, I don't have to do that legally, right? I mean, I just need to get win-win and sign the contract. Do I have to really deal with this? Well, things are starting to change. a Quebec river was just granted legal rights as part of a global personhood movement. So now our river actually has legal rights in Canada, and this is increasing. We even had animals recognized as legal person the first time in the US. This is not totally new. Actually, there were pigs that were tried for murder in the early days in the United States. But actually, this is starting to come, right? You're starting to have to think more broadly about who you're affecting and the environment, especially. And a lot of my work, as was mentioned early on, has been on how corporations reckon and atone for participation in mass atrocity. So there's really a win-win-win too that corporations will be thinking about, the dead and the living and the unborn. How do corporations atone for who they've harmed before? How do they serve the living? And then not, destroy the environment for those yet to come. So those of us in leadership positions or have any power have a huge amount of ability to shift some of these structural systems of inequity and blind spots by thinking in that framework. So again, today I talked about two things, and I know very quickly, but I get very excited about all of this, and I only have 1 hour with you all, and I'd love to have you for a semester or more, or maybe you'll read the book. But we talked about negotiating for everyday change. The book is filled with examples of people who have made this leap, from the margins into stability, how they do it, what they're up against, and with examples that are very relatable. Even if you grew up wealthy, you're going to find pieces in this where you can relate, like places where you shut down and stopped thinking through why you don't ask for what you want in certain areas of your life. And then the second part being the equitable futures. How do we really transform these systems? Taking people who are marginalized and then just getting them into power doesn't guarantee that they're going to then transform the system. It's too easy just to pick up and then perpetuate it. I mean, this is what we've learned from, Bourdieu and Foucault, and the way that we replicate these systems. So I hope you find this is useful and entertaining. The book is entertaining too. I mean, I love their stories. I had the students not only share their stories, but edit the chapters, tell me what they think, because it really is collective work. So if you're interested, do put your email in the chat. I will let you know when the book is out. I will not harass you with tons of emails, but I will let you know when it's available. And would love to hear like how these exercises and examples in the book affect lives. It's just so exciting to teach this, because you actually get to see people make changes. I mean, one of my students, she got a $40,000 raise in the class. I challenge everybody to pay for the class. And they do. Most of them, have the ability to do that. So I think I'm just at 35 minutes. Please do announce, send me your email if you'd like me to include you, or email me yourself. And my publications, I try to make them as available as possible, like that introduction for the conflict resolution, those 3 eras of conflict resolution, you can get on ResearchGate. The whole intro is there, a preprint of it. So if you need, to see something like that for your own work, please let me know. And now I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you, Donna, and everyone for your attention.
Oh my goodness, Sarah, that was remarkable. And tell me, did you come up with the third win? Was that your idea?
So it came to me while I was teaching that we need to do the third win. But then when I went back, I noticed in William Urey's Getting to Yes with Yourself, he nods to it at the end, like we should think beyond ourselves. So he was getting there, but he didn't, it wasn't, what he was focused on that moment. But I thought, yeah, we've got to. And John Elkington does it a bit in the triple bottom line. Some people may have heard of that concept. So it's there, but it hasn't been talked about in this way or brought squarely into negotiation of like, this is how we need to be thinking, and we need to practice together.
Yeah, no, I mean, it includes the rest of the world in your decision making and in your negotiation strategies and skills. I just think it's profound. And so everything that you said today is profound. And I want to congratulate you, because including the wisdom of your students, people whose lived experience is so different from yours and ours. I just bravo. I just can't tell you. I'm almost moved to tears, to tell you the truth. It is so powerful. Now, I just want to read a couple of the questions.
Sure.
I'll start out. One person is asking you, how exactly do you teach people to know what to ask for and how to ask for it?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And that's great, because the crazy request game is they're just supposed to be like, just totally nuts requests. But then I talk about higher stakes negotiations. And here's where, the traditional negotiation advice I talk about isn't wrong. You want to prepare, you want to know your field, you want to know the range, but it depends on what field you're in. And the examples in the book are much more detailed to the kinds of places that my students were navigating to know how to ask, and even, they'd say things like, I can't say this sentence because it sounds like I'm just like a person that I read like a white person's book. And now I repeat it and I sound ridiculous. So you have to adapt it to your environment. But you do want to prepare. You want to understand the context. You want to do that work of really getting clear about what you want. One of the great, and it's in the book, but making a list of your ego wants versus your soul wants. Oh,
that's beautiful.
Like what is your real, what is your soul want? What do you want to contribute? And then the ego part, yeah, I want, this kind of money, this kind of, but if you can connect to that, that will help you get your clarity, and then you'll study your context and how to navigate. But if you want to email me, we can chat more about, your context and what you're working on.
Yeah, it's like, how do you want to think about your contribution to the greater good? That is that third realm. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we have others here. So Ana Margarita Sanchez Faculi, sorry, Ana. Here's her question. I say, let them practice in their own dojo, which would you know what she's talking about? Okay, which would be their home or immediate family. Okay. So from your experience, how does the digital world bridge or create greater gaps in conflict resolution? And how do we optimize digital platforms for negotiation?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I have a whole chapter on that. And I did a lot of research on how we use these digital platforms for negotiation and so on. If you can believe it, especially with texting, the best advice that was coming out was people who were giving dating advice about texting, because there isn't a lot in negotiation of like, how do you text back? Do you like make them wait? Do you like just, say a little? So I talk about how to use it. A lot of people are starting to use ChatGPT for their business emails and to sound professional, but I just want to caution you against that because you're trying to make a personal connection, right? And you want to find where you can connect with that person, show that you see them, show that you know what they care about, and that you're supporting them and you're supporting each other, right? That you're in like a mutual gain. So I know brevity, it's so easy to be brief on these, but if you can take the time to greet someone, stay connected, inquire, because so much of the pain in this world is feeling disconnected and isolated. I mean, Sherry Turkle's work is magnificent on this, Reclaiming Conversation and the Empathy Diaries and so on. So she talks about the important getting off those screens. No screens at dinner, like put your phones away. So part of it is eliminating it. And I'll talk about it in the book, but as soon as you start to spin out on email or on text, like you're starting to have an emotional conversation, get on the phone, stop, like do not keep going and have a text fight. Like it will not work in your favor. It may be very poetic and you might say something really smart. But I would say as quickly as possible, use it just to communicate facts, but not emotions in the same way.
Yeah, that sounds like really good advice. Here's another question. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for this honest and insightful talk. I wonder if you can talk a bit more about your experience of collaborating with fellow scholars who bring more diverse set of experiences and insights to the table. So you talked about collaborating with your students, but what about fellow scholars?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the book, especially the book on the chapter on race, sex, and gender, the tremendous amount of research on ethnicity and on gender. Like, a lot of the gender research is often done by white women, but of course, unsurprisingly, that increasingly the literature on ethnicity is coming out of more historically marginalized groups. So I draw heavily on their research, interviewed them when I can. Yeah, absolutely, because there's a lot of experts in there, and we're going to have more. I mean, this book is just to open the conversation, and I hope you read it and say, "Oh, I want to write about my context." and whether that's Nepal, right, or Cambodia, or even the banlieue in Paris. Yeah.
Right. I mean, because this really is a human issue that you're pointing to, and the human experience of living in a different reality, many times. So a whole different lived experience. So,
and yeah,
go ahead.
To add to that, but just I did do it was a great training at the Harvard Divinity School, Restorative Justice for Racial Healing with Fania Davis and Tanisha Bankhead, and they taught me quite a bit that I used in my classes and informed my work as well.
From the Divinity School, you're saying Harvard?
Yeah, they're at the Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, but they came to the Divinity School and gave a great training. So yeah, I find these trainings when I can, because I sure have a lot of gaps.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, Sarah, so there's more. Doc, what are your views on social responsibility of the CEOs and others at the top of the organization who employ majority people? Do you have a program for that audience?
Great. I'm so glad you asked that. I think if CEOs were really present to how important they are, not ego present, but soul present, they would probably be moved almost to tears, how much they matter. So yeah, part of this is going to be training and supporting that. My next book is on reckoning, helping corporations atone or reckon with their past, both to handle the legacies of whether slavery, colonialism, or genocide, and then how to be equitable going forward in the future. Because it's connected. Actually, time, the dead, the living, and unborn, it's all sort of at once. So yeah, that's a really important target for me. My next book's coming out with MIT Press. It's really targeting that group. And my Harvard Business Review work and so on is really talking about how to create these diverse teams. And even though maybe a company is run by someone white and everybody in it is white, people have diverse backgrounds. You don't know the poverty that they came from or the abuse. And I think what I found was that this message resonates with people who look like they've got it all together, but are covering a lot of pain themselves. And that, again, our destinies are intertwined by helping people who are in historically marginalized communities. People in the dominant group are actually going to find their own liberation too. I do not believe that, it is that I'm not free if you're not free. And this work, it's not at the expense of, you're not giving up, you're gaining. You're truly gaining by doing this. Yeah.
So just following up on that for a second, Sarah, I've had some experiences where it's really difficult to work with someone in a leadership position like a CEO and try to hold the mirror up and see the blind spots that are, preventing them from, in being more inclusive or being more, targeting different points of view, diverse perspectives. What do you do with those blind spots?
It's great because, unlike universities and seminaries and museums that look back, that's what they do. Corporations are taught to look forward, right? And solve the problem and bottom line and shareholders, right? That is where they're focused. And they're not trained or oriented. So one, and I know I don't mean this to be a cop-out, but one is in our business schools, we need to include this training far more. So by the time leaders get there, they're oriented. Sometimes the work comes from employees from within. So Lloyd's of London, for example, that's been doing a lot of atonement around slavery. It was Black employees within the organization that pushed the organization forward. Sometimes as an outsider, it's difficult. I know, this work that I did on the French National Railways, trying to get the railways to do it. One of the things I think is we talked about this before we got on the big call, but to get out of the blame game and get into the conversation about opportunity. Corporate responsibility is an opportunity to be responsible, an opportunity to step up. Corporate CEOs don't like being told that they're responsible for slavery. They didn't do it. They weren't here then, so don't treat them like they're opponents or that they're evil, right? But to really bring out the best in them. So I think it's talking about it as collective work, not you have to do this. We are all responsible. We inherited these legacies. It's our planet, So I think getting out of that and, in cancel culture and the way that we're operating, people are nervous, they're afraid of being boycotted and hated. So I think really shifting away from that, making it a we project.
I mean, taking the shame out of the process is really the way to go.
Yeah.
All right, we've got so many more questions here. So this person is saying, hi, how to present this thought process to quickly garner buy-in to initiatives where companies promise to work with minorities and they don't, for example, in the clothing industry or the medical industry. So how do you present this to them?
No, I really hope to have the opportunity to do that. But it's great. I think, so many brands are being rewarded for doing this and talking about their supply chain. I mean, there was that big exposure of the child labor, migrant labor in the US, Walmart, Cheetos, and Fruit of the Loom, right? And they're being shamed and exposed. I mean, you don't want that. And I don't think people who run corporations want to hurt other people. Who goes, I asked, a whole group of business students, like, how many of you are going into business to commit genocide and to perpetuate slavery, right? No one raises their hand for that. We're born into these systems. We're all wearing clothes right now. I don't know, there's this slavery footprint, if you want to go on that. It's really humbling. You put in all the kinds of products you use, and it estimates how many slaves you have working for you around the world. I did this in Baltimore. My own students were like, oh my God, I have 27, slaves, and here I am feeling oppressed and I'm oppressing others. So it's that interconnectedness, and really shining a light on companies like Patagonia who built their brands based on that responsibility.
Based on that, yeah. Okay, here's another one. What are strategies for moving forward in a negotiation where one party with power doesn't want to support the underprivileged?
Oh, yeah. One, I would ask you why you want to work with that partner. I mean, you don't always have a choice, but a lot of times we do. And to your point, to this great question, and Donna's point as well, sometimes you're up against somebody who's just not going to make that shift. They're not. And so either you have to find somebody who else is going to influence them, find something that they care about. I mean, this is the traditional approach. Like, what do they care about? What's important to them? Also what kind of legacy they want to leave. How do they want to be remembered? You have to figure out if people want to be famous or rich, I would say. And if they want to be famous, you talk about their legacy. And if they want to be rich, you talk about how it's going to affect their bottom line. And diverse teams do show to be more profitable. I mean, my students were so in my blind spot, like I didn't know how big it was. But great leaders want people who sit in their blind spot. Yes. That's what leadership is. If you want to be great, you got to know what's happening on your ship. And that means you need people looking in all directions. And not only with different passports, but with the different epistemologies.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I'm going to do two questions at once here. One person wants to know when the book will be available, but this other question is, hi, Dr. Federman, are the stories from students from the University of Baltimore? Is that where you're?
Oh, yeah. So for the book, August of this year. So happy to talk more about that is the goal.
Inshallah.
It's coming. I don't just keep moving.
Yeah.
But I'm editing the final manuscript now, and I'm excited. So yeah, it's a combination of the students from Baltimore, also people who've been able to successfully negotiate from margins. I also interviewed students in LA from Hispanic community and other communities who have made that shift. So I wanted to get a little more diverse group there. So it's not just Baltimore; it is a little bit of LA and some others. Yeah. And I also draw in indigenous communities in Canada. Yeah, historically marginalized groups in Canada, but especially the First Nations.
Wonderful. So it was the University of Baltimore, though, yes, to this question.
Yes, it was that university, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so here's one more, and we may have to, this may be the last, let's see. So what's your first and foremost advice when you are in a really weak position and have to deal with bigger group or more powerful or even worse with opinionated people? Like when you are the minority within the minority group and you want to make change. Coalition building is cool advice, but sometimes it looks like advice from those brilliant books you have to start to deal with now and here. So
oh God, I mean, at first wow, it sounds like you wouldn't ask that if you weren't in that position, and that is so painful because it brings up exclusion exclusion we hate. It's nice to be the marginalized voice for justice, but it is very difficult to maintain that. And so there's a few things. One is I like to back up and say, like, what am I really committed to here? Because sometimes we get attached to how the change is going to happen, and it's going to be this person is going to do this thing, and that's how it has to happen in this room. But if we back up and like get quiet, step away from the people, what is it that you really want to see? And then sometimes the solution can come from somewhere really bizarre and surprising. I mean, it can be very surprising when, it ends up being the oil industry that interrupts a genocide. You want it to be the peace building group. But if you're not attached to who has to make the change or how it happens, you can shift, and sometimes other strategies will occur to you or other people will pop up. So sometimes when we're too tight and we're in the fight, we need to back away. Also, for the Mary Fitzduff talking about our brains, when our amygdala is firing, we're having a hard time with the neocortex, with the more complex thinking. So we're in the fight. So like Safe Street says, back away, calm down. And then I would say get attached with those values and start to be open to other, maybe really strange ways that you can accomplish that.
Yeah. Okay, one more, and then we have to turn it over to Nicole. There's so many others, and I apologize in advance that we can't get to them all.
Yeah, or email me if you want with those questions. Yeah.
So here's the last question. Sarah, thanks very much for a cogent and inspiring talk. I can easily see how your principles can improve negotiation theory and practice. How could these principles also contribute to just peace building that sometimes ignores negotiation and dialogue?
That's so great. I love this question. It's perfect to end with because it comes full circle. Because not only did negotiation miss out on peace building wisdom, I think peace building has missed out on negotiation because it's like, oh, well, that's business and law. We don't do that. We're the peace builders. We got to get more strategic and savvier. So I want like more peace builders taking business classes. I want more business students taking peace classes. And that's really teaming up. So absolutely, like I do think more peace builders want to play that strategic game, because otherwise you're just on the fringes, with your signs. You're not at the table. And I know sometimes peace builders feel like they're selling out if they go to like track one discussions because they're now inside power.
Yes.
So, yeah. Oh, great question.
Sarah,
and I'm with you all in doing this. Yeah.
And we do have to end it there because I need to turn it over to Nicole, but a million thanks. This was so inspiring. And I'm just so happy to see the direction that your work is going, and it's really going to improve the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Likewise.
All right, here we go to Diane. To Nicole.
Diane's there behind the scenes.
Diane's so there too, yeah.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Sarah. It's hard to be the closer after such an incredible and inspiring presentation. But of course, we do like to let people know about other events coming up with the program on negotiation. So we have Yale Professor Barry Nailbuff on March 30th, presenting his work, Split the Pie on Negotiation. And then David Hoffman and Helen Winter of Harvard Law School on April 26th. We look forward to seeing you at another PON live event over the course of a lunchtime one of these days, or perhaps at one of our trainings on negotiation or mediation, whether in person in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or online throughout the next couple of months. So thank you everyone for this wonderful discussion. Thank you to our speakers, and we hope to see you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.